Sleepless Knights.
I don't regret anything, and you can feel free to judge me however you like. I did what I had to do. Sacrifices must be made. Sacrifices must be made. Sacrifices must be made. It was about 9 at night, just like any other night. Nothing was strange. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Me and a friend of mine had been chatting online, something we do frequently. Except when she got online, she didn't seem the same.
Matt, guess what just happened to me? Guess. Can you guess? You'll never guess.
You were online and found out where to buy a brain?
Ah, Matthew, you obviously have original talent and should be commemorated for being a genius. And no, I didn't find a brain.
It's a crying shame. LOL.
Just listen. I was checking my email and I got a letter from ᵈᶤЄЄρ Academy, and guess what? I got accepted. Isn't that great?
Do you mind filling me in on whatever that is?
Beats me, but doesn't it sound prestigious? The bus will be arriving shortly. I'm going to live my dream.
Are you seriously about to get on a bus at 9 at night and go someplace that you've never even heard of?
Precisely.
Doesn't that sound a little fishy?
Does it really even matter? It says the only thing that's going on tonight is orientation, and it'll only take about 30 minutes or so. Then I'll be right back.
She sounded so sure that she'd return that night. Looking back on it, I think that I should have tried to talk her out of it. Isn't that what a good friend would have done?
So, do you want to join me?
You're asking me if I want to get on a bus going somewhere that I have no idea about? For all I know, it could be some kind of cannibal farm, and me and you would probably just be the entrees.
You sound so scared, Matt. Are you scared? You've always been a pussy, Matt. Always.
She really knew how to push my buttons. A few years ago, when we were in 9th grade, she invited me over to a pool party she was throwing at her house. I didn't really expect anything unusual because I was always going over to her house to chill. I should have known that something was off when I arrived at her house and she wasn't in her front yard. She's always in her front yard. I was about to go to her door and knock, but as soon as I arrived at the door, her mother opened it with a look of distress on her face. "Oh, Matthew, hurry. Janine is in the backyard and she desperately needs your help. Hurry to the back and use the gate." Yeah. I didn't even think about what she said as I bolted to the back gate and flung it open. "Holy shit!" I screamed. The first thing I saw when I opened the gate was what seemed to be a 6-foot-tall Great Dane lunging at me. Now, I am aware that the dog really wasn't that big, but when it's running full speed at you, you aren't really thinking clearly about the situation. I ran back to the front screaming, just to see Janine's mother laughing hysterically. What the fuck was funny about me receiving to be a soon-to-be mauling from a gigantic bear-like dog? I then heard a whistle and a
Here, Boulder.
And it sounded pretty close to Janine's voice. The dog instantly snapped back around and ran to the backyard. I eventually make myself go back there, panting and looking half dead, when I see a bunch of people, including Janine, laughing their asses off at the situation. She had let that dog off the leash on purpose, just to frighten me. And it worked. That dog thing happened like 3 years ago, and I am not a pussy. I tried to make myself sound threatening online.
Fine. If you aren't a little pussy, then come on the bus with me.
I am sure that you can't even bring other people, so stop trying to convince me to go.
Actually, the email says I can't go unless I bring a loved one or a near friend. So I'm deciding to bring you. You should be grateful.
Was she really going to bring me to this event that seemed so important to her? What made me so special? And am I the near friend or the loved one? I have to admit, I'd had a crush on Janine since the 4th grade. She had the lightest green eyes. It's like staring into glistening emeralds. She has the blondest hair. She looks like an angel. Why would she want to take me?
Why don't you take your boyfriend? I'm sure that he'd love to go. Or why not your mom?
Fuck them, Matt. Just come on. It says I have to reply within an hour of getting it, along with who I'm taking. So, am I submitting your name or not?
Fine. I'll go. Are you happy? I should have said no.
Okay, I submitted your... I just got the reply that they're already outside now. How in the hell could they...
She was interrupted by loud horn honking. I thought she was messing with me. There's no way that they could have gotten there that fast.
Matt, hurry up. They're outside. Get on your bike and hurry.
I got my pants on and ran to my bike, telling my parents that I'd be back shortly. I wouldn't be back shortly. I wouldn't be back at all.
When I arrived, she was outside with a suitcase. She didn't tell me that I needed anything, so I didn't have anything with me. We boarded the bus, but it felt wrong. The bus wasn't an ordinary bus. It was sort of shaped like a rectangle, like no round edges, just a big rectangle on wheels. And it looked like it had been a vehicle in like some sort of war zone. Not only that, but the bus wasn't lit too well, and it was nighttime, which made it difficult to see the driver. Janine went first, and the driver asked her what her name was.
Janine Polinsky? I got in...
I know what you got. Just put your suitcase in the overhead space, and take your seat behind the first one on the left.
He said all of that without even looking at her. But when she moved on, and I got up there, he looked dead at me. It was hard to see his facial features in the dark, but what I could see was his bone-shaking smile, and his seemingly dark red-tinted eyes. I'm
Matthew, take your seat. Second on the right.
He never broke eye contact, and for a minute, or what seemed like a minute, we stared at each other. It seemed like he could sense my fear, and I was pretty scared due to the fact that he knew my name. After I sat down, I realized that Janine entered my name to show that I was her plus one. I let out a sigh of relief. The bus was filled with a good number of people, and everyone was conversing amongst themselves. I looked at Janine and she just stared out the window. I wasn't like her. I asked her if anything was the matter, and she just turned and gave me a blank stare. We were staring at each other for about 30 seconds before she muttered,
I don't think we should be here.
in a concerned and serious whisper. She was right. We had one more stop, and it didn't take us too long to get there. When we pulled up, a teenage boy who looked to be no more than 13 ran out, holding what looked like to be his grandmother's hand. He approached the bus and then entered.
What's your name, kid?
Jake Guthrie. And this is my Aunt Sharon. We're here to win $1 million.
$1 million? Janine hadn't told me there was any cash prize for whatever the hell we were about to do. I looked over to her and asked, $1 million? Don't you think that would have been worth mentioning to me?
I guess it slipped my mind.
She replied. She sounded like she wasn't paying full attention to me. So I looked at her, and she was peering up at something. I looked up and I could see through the mirror
that the driver was staring directly at Janine, smiling. "The fuck is he looking at?" I said to her, but she wouldn't turn away from him. They had locked gazes and didn't seem to plan on moving anytime soon. About a second later, the driver closed the door and Jake and his aunt took their seats.
Hold on to your seats, folks. Things might get messy,
he said in a muffled voice. I don't know how a bus could move like this, but it seemed like the bus suddenly went from 0 to 300 in about a millisecond. Everyone was forced back into their seats as the bus rocketed forward. About what seemed to be 10 seconds later, he came to a full stop saying,
"Folks, we've made it. ᵈᶤЄયρℓєЄρℓє뾱ᵘ Academy."
I wish he would have never said that, but it was too late. In a quick movement, the driver pushed a button near him, and all of a sudden, 2 walls protruded from each side of the window I was sitting next to, and then a third connected the two, boxing me in. I could only see through the window, and what I saw terrified me. We were somehow driving over what seemed to be a full-on fire blazing below us. It may have even been lava of some sort.
"Let me out of this box! Now!"
I shouted at the top of my lungs. It didn't come out the way I wanted it to, because I was pretty damn scared. Nothing. I could hear nothing except my voice bouncing back off the steel solid walls. About 5 seconds after that, I heard a buzzing noise. It got louder and louder. It got so loud that it felt like the noise was traveling through my brain. And then a second later, it was gone. I thought everything was back to normal, but then I felt movement. It felt like that I had been somehow disconnected from the bus, and when I looked out the window, I was still traveling over fire, but I was headed to a building of some sort. It was a stadium, and the loud cheering could be heard coming from it, even when I wasn't close to it. As I was approaching it, I heard the cheering getting louder and louder. It wasn't like normal cheering, not like the cheering for a team. It was more like the constant chanting of the word,
"Death."
As I was approaching the stadium, I could see something out my window. It was Jake, and he looked so scared that his appearance even shook me. His box, or container, or whatever it was, aligned in front of mine, and I could no longer see his face, only the back of his box. We eventually reached the side of the dome, where the numerous boxes, I was assuming that the others behind me had lined up in a similar fashion, gathered into one single line, and went into a tunnel on the side of the dome. Above the dome, I could barely read the words, "Cúpula de la Muerte." I had taken Spanish since middle school, and knew exactly what it said. Dome of Death. This is when I began to have a mental, physical, and spiritual breakdown. As the boxes entered the dome, the roaring of the crowd became unbearable, and I fell on my knees, covering my ears. To be clear, at this point, I can look out my window and only see darkness. This is because Jake's box is directly pressed against mine. After about a minute of arriving, I could hear a voice that I immediately picked up on. It was the bus driver's voice.
"Quiet down, everyone. Maestro is speaking. Hello, my loving fans. I'm glad that you could make it to the annual Dome of Death celebration."
Celebration? What the hell is this guy talking about? This is called the Dome of Death, and they're having some sort of celebration? I tried to break the window, but it was no use.
"I've gathered once again the easiest prey, 20 unsuspecting and foolish humans, to be tortured in front of your very eyes.
My heart stopped. I froze in place. We were about to be the entertainment of some fucking psychopath, and there was nothing we could do about it. I thought that this was all some joke, and I shouted,
"Janine, if you think you can scare me again, you're an idiot."
I was hoping that she would respond back. She didn't. Suddenly, I felt a rumble, and I could feel my box moving forward. I fell with my back on the wall, and what happened next still gives me chills. I could now see the stadium in full view, and it was huge. The first thing I saw was Jake's box drop about 50 feet to the bottom. I looked across the stadium and also saw his aunt's box drop simultaneously. The chanting roared,
Death, 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 death.
I looked up again and saw something straight ahead. Something that really made my heart stop. It was Janine, and she was staring directly at me. It was then that we both knew what our fate was. We were going to have to try our best to kill one another. And that was that. To further certify my suspicion, the maestro started speaking again.
Here we will watch as a nephew, Jake Guthrie and his aunt, Sharon Swatson, go head to head and fight to the death. And remember, crowd, if someone isn't dead within a minute, we'll drop batches of flesh-eating poison over the victims.
Everything then went silent, at least for me. I started sweating profusely, and I felt like my insides were about to rush out through my anus. Did he really just say something about flesh-eating poison? Why did we even agree to get on that bus?
Begin,
the maestro shouted. Jake and his aunt had been dropped behind gates, and the gates were now open. The two just stared at each other, and then a large blade fell from nowhere, directly between the two. They both looked at it, then looked at each other. For about 10 seconds, they just stared. Only God knows what they were thinking. Then it happened. Jake sprinted forward, and in an attempt to grab the blade, he lunged but tripped over a rock, breaking his ankle. His aunt then slowly approached him and stared down at him. I couldn't believe that I was actually watching this competition where loved ones were forced to kill each other. And then it flashed across my mind. Which one of us would die? I looked back at the field to see his aunt still looking at him.
20 seconds left,
the maestro shouted. Jake looked up at his aunt and began to cry. The crowd went wild for this. Death, 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 death. They blared as loud as they could. I forced myself to watch. I just couldn't turn away, no matter how much I wanted to. Then I heard myself murmur, death, death, death. Jake's aunt was still staring at him.
10 more seconds,
he shouted. Jake's aunt then picked up the blade slowly, never looking away from him. She began to cry as the crowd went insane. Then, bam. It was over. It was all over. With one quick slice, it was all over.
The winner of round 1 give it up for Jake Guthrie,"
the maestro declared. The crowd went insane again. "Death, death, death, death," they all shouted. Jake's aunt had shoved the blade in her throat and fell over twitching. The sight was horrifying, yet it was somewhat intensely intriguing. Jake was then escorted to a door, where he was then taken off somewhere deeper within the stadium.
Up next, we've got Best Friends for Life, Matthew Holloway and Janine McNeish,
the maestro said with an even more boisterous voice than before. Who the hell was Janine McNeish? I then began to feel my box move forward. Then in an instant, I plummeted to the bottom of the stadium. Just the drop itself was scary, never minding the fact that I was about to have to murder my best friend.
"Begin,"
the maestro said in an extremely unruly tone. One of the most disturbing parts of this competition is that they didn't even give us a new weapon, and they didn't move Jake's aunt out of the way. She was still there, with the blade in her throat, and they expected us to actually go up and take it out. This has disturbed me since. When the gates opened, I could see Janine on the other side of the field, sitting down, whimpering. I just stood there, staring at her, not knowing what to do next. The maestro then said something that shook me.
"Remember that we drop flesh-eating acid on the victims after the minute is up. And remember, Matthew, she called you a pussy."
I couldn't believe that he knew that. And he knew exactly how to push my buttons. After he said that, he looked directly at me, smiling. He was sitting on some kind of throne that was also a cage, and he just smiled. I said before that you can judge me for whatever reason, and I don't care because I did what I had to do. And I was mad. I was fucking furious. She was now going to understand that Matthew Holloway isn't a pussy, and she was going to learn quickly. I ran over to Jake's dead aunt and pulled the blade out of her throat. Then I started walking over to Janine. She was sitting down, covering her face with her hands, shrieking. The sound she made would make any sane man go completely mad. She just sat there, screaming, crying, kicking, pleading for her life. Once I got over to her, I raised the blade, and before I could slice her, she said,
"I love you, Matt."
I wish I was thinking clearly at that time, because any real man would have done exactly what Jake's aunt had did, and took his own life. But according to Janine, I wasn't a man. I was a pussy. With tears in my eyes, I took the blade, and I sliced through her fucking face. I could see inside of her head. She was screaming, a scream that I could never get out of my head. And it makes me want to kill myself when I hear it play back through my mind. But I didn't stop there. No, not at all. I started to gouge her eyes out. Then I proceeded to cut her stomach open. I was about to go further, until someone came over and stopped me. It was the maestro.
"You've done an excellent job, my boy. You may now continue on to the next level."
He then raised my hand and shouted,
"Give it up for Matthew Holloway for winning round 2.
I was then escorted to the exiting door, deeper into the stadium. Then someone started whispering in my ear.
Sacrifices must be made. Sacrifices must be made.
Sacrifices must be made. Sacrifices must be made.
But that isn't the end of it. That is merely the beginning.
Sleepless Nights.
Are you sleepy, huh?